Lately, I've been experiencing a very strange change in the world. It would seem that the nights are growing longer, and it would seem that the air around us is being drained of its warmth. And outside, when I look upon the trees, I see the leaves and they're changing colors. And on top of all this, it would seem that anything that I pick up with my hands, whether it be music, art, movies or television, right down to the books that I read, are being turned into terrible, horrifying sounds. Stories of grotesque pleasure into cinema of non-stop bloodshed. And like a bag of bricks, it hit me all at once. And I realized that finally, the spooky season is upon us. And with this realization, I looked out my window, and upon a cemetery hill, a giant pumpkin began to grow. And with this, a great fear that I must lay to bed. A fear of not being able to release all the different spooky videos that I would like to this year, and a fear of not hitting my Halloween quota. And with this, I knew that I needed to sit down, and I needed to sort myself out, and I needed to bring upon all the stories of evil, the undead, and the uncanny to all of you. And I think I know exactly where we need to start. And so, with this message heated upon me, I took over to Mercury, and I took over to eBay, in the place where I find all my most unique horror comic books. Things that I've never really heard about before, and things that just kind of send me down an ever-spiraling wormhole, and I absolutely found it. And the thing that I bring to you today is called GORE SHRIEK DELECTUS, a book that I've not really been able to find any information about, or at least this specific print, as this one is limited to over 3,000 copies, and it was released in 1989. And what it seems to be is an anthology of a 6-volume series, not unlike Creepshow, of a bunch of different stories that are very adult and very dangerous. Stories that would come from a very small mom and pop comic book shop, a place where they would only do mail-in orders, and a place where they only had a shop that featured a bunch of rare collector's items. And it would seem that all these GORE SHRIEK DELECTUS volumes that they release are very limited in their runs. I think the latest one is a new one from either 2020 or 2023 that they only made a mere 500 copies or so. And with the only other information that I found is that these are a very sought after book. I've seen a lot of these for going over $50, and I actually managed to find mine for $10 in pretty good condition. And the things that lie inside and all the artwork within are extremely dark. It's all black and white coloring, and a style that I really don't see in any of these modern comic books. And so today, with GORE SHRIEK DELECTUS, a title so fitting for what lies inside, I thought we would sit down and kick off the spooky season right. With only a month and a couple days left, we are going to sit down and I'm going to cover 3 different stories from this. 3 stories of absolute terror, one involving mall security with a slew of people suddenly disappearing, but no evidence of any kind of break-in, other than a few things placed back into the mall. In the second story, about a young boy who cannot be trusted to just run along home alone on a Sunday when his parents are going to church, and at this age is too restless to be sitting in the pews. No, he must sit in a drawer. And while this is a very short story, the artwork depicted in this are also absolutely horrifying, and maybe even a little over the top. But with the third story, we will see a hunter wilding out in the forest, taking down whatever he can, until his family finally hunts him back. And with these 3 stories, I think I can really show you what GORE SHRIEK is all about. This amazing little book, this piece of rare literature. So without a doubt, turn down the lights, get yourself a snack, and let us sit down, and let's kick off this season right. And we will enter our first story, only known as Mall Rats, as we're looking over all these different vendors and all these different food establishments till we cut to a clothing store where we see an older woman just kind of browsing. And when she actually steps away from all the different racks, heading over to the clearance bin, you look off in the distance, and from within inside of the rack comes a pair of growling hands, something that would snatch a someone up and leave nothing but a trail of blood, and then soon after, nothing at all. And this will be the introduction of our story, and what comes next is the main character. A man who absolutely loves his job because he doesn't really have to do much. But when something is beginning to kind of intrude on his workplace, all these missing people in the city, and a lot of these people from the mall, he begins to realize that he's eventually going to have to actually start doing his job. As all these different retailers are beginning to come after him, telling him that somebody has been breaking in, and actually not leaving any kind of a trace, but merely just kind of adding to their stock. Places that don't really make sense sense. And with this, Ed McClen wants nothing more than to just be left alone. My name is Ed McClen. I'm a security officer here at Pondview Mall, a rent-a-cop. The mall's not a bad place to work. The pay's good and the place is clean. But there's something weird about this place, and I don't know what it is. Take these disappearances for instance. Every so often, somebody just disappears. There's no trace of them, no car, no nothing. And if you ask me, this latest one probably just ran off with a bag boy from the shop and save. But it's disturbing that nearly all of them were last seen here at the mall. But me, I got other problems. And with this, we see a short and stout man running from the Happy Burger over to this Ed McClen. With some of the complaints that I mentioned earlier, that somebody's actually broken into his establishment, and Ed wants absolutely nothing to do with this. He's actually kind of fairly rude to this man, telling him that if he has no evidence that anybody was ever in there, if there's nothing stolen, that how could he possibly do an investigation? And as Ed McClen thinks in his head that this man has shit for brains, and immediately takes it back, not wanting to disturb the surrounding flies, we'll cut to the next panel where we'll meet another set of characters. These people that look very strangely like rats, these teenagers only known as mall rats, but a bunch of people that seemingly just hang out here all the time. They don't really buy anything, and they don't really disturb anyone. And for Ed, this really isn't that big of a deal, but for the other security officers, they absolutely want them out. In spite of the fact that I have to deal with pinheads like Ron, this is the easiest job I've ever had. I've never seen a mall with so little crime. It's strange. Not that I'm complaining, mind you. Like every other mall, we have our collections of mall rats. That is, kids that seem to spend all their time just hanging around the mall. I can understand that. I practically grew up hanging around a pool hall. But unlike other malls, however, these kids give us hardly any trouble at all. Jeez, Jimmy, are you here again? Don't you have any school? Oh, hi, Mr. M. No school today. Teachers' conference or something. Yeah, sure, I bet. Really, Jimmy, don't you guys have anything better to do than just to hang around here? Nothing could be better, Mr. M. This is like the center of the universe. And this young gentleman goes on to kind of explain that you are what you buy, and that this mall really is the only thing to be done in town. That when this mall was established, it's sucked out all the business from any other mom and pop shop across the city. And when he says this, he lets off a grin, something that Ed McClen has noticed for a very long time. That when this boy opens his mouth, there is nothing to be seen except a bunch of very misshapen teeth. Some are fangs, and some would just seem to be outright plate armor for this boy's mouth. And with this, and with his wispy mustache, he resembles himself, a mall rat. But as Ed McClen and young Jimmy are just kind of having a good time, just kind of harassing each other in a friendly kind of manner, we are greeted to another one of the mall security guards, a man who is absolutely sick of seeing these people hanging around, and a man who is willing to take action in the job that he loves. I thought I told you kids to stop hanging around here. And here comes another problem. And you, McClen, what are you doing talking to these losers? Don't you know you're encouraging them? This is Gary Vidal, another security guard, and he takes his job just a little too seriously. Look, I told the kids to stop loitering, and I mean it. Oh, come on, Gary, calm down. They're not hurting anyone. Look, I'm just doing my job. If you weren't gutless, you'd stand up to them. When I was in the army, we called guys like Gary highly motivated individuals. But nowadays, I just call him a 7-letter word beginning with an A. And as we leave this scene of Gary the mall cop just kind of screaming at these kids, telling them to leave, and telling them to go back to school, we are cutting to the dark times of the mall, when everybody leaves and the lights go down low, and it's nobody else but Ed McClen left to kind of surveil everything. And he kind of goes on to explain that he actually enjoys this a lot, that he gets time and a half, and it is very quiet, and the only thing required of him is a walkthrough of the premise every 30 or so minutes. And as he goes off for his nightly routine, he hears a loud scream way off in the distance, and hears a crashing to the floor, and immediately begins to run, as this is basically the first time that anything's really happened at this mall. At least the first thing that he's ever really noticed. The only kind of noises, the only kind of stirrings, and shrieking. And as he continues to run down the halls, he comes across something that he's never seen before. And what is lying there in front of him is Gary's dead body on the floor, as we see his intestines completely pulled out of his body, and surrounding him like bloody tentacles. And Ed thinks to himself that this man once called him gutless. And with this terrifying sight, we see Ed McClen just running down the hall, trying to get back to his office so he can get to a phone and alert the real authorities that this job might just be a little over this little mall cop's own head. And while he's not entirely wrong, he eventually does get to this phone, and as he picks it up, something immediately strikes him, and he realizes that as soon as he calls that this body is going to be gone. But he knows it's there, as he felt the warm blood beneath it, and he's seen it with his very own eyes. And for some reason, he just decides that he's not even going to try. guy that he's just going to put the phone away, and the only thing left in his head is that the killer of Gary must still be in this building. And suddenly he hears footsteps behind him, and he turns his entire body and he is greeted by young Jimmy, the mall rat, the kid who's been loitering around everywhere, this kid who seems to have an awful lot of opinions about small business being affected by the greater corporate evil. And he just says, "Hello, Mr. M. Can I call you Ed?" "Jimmy, what are you doing here?" "Oh, just taking care of some business." "You killed Gary. Why?" "Well, he deserved it." "Did he know that he had been shoplifting appliances from here regularly? Tonight, we caught him with a VCR, so we did to him like we did to all the rest. You see, Ed, things are different now, and this here mall's completely changed this town. It's happened to a lot of towns. A mall appears and zap, there's hundreds more stores than before. So many more things to buy. The little local places dry up and blow away. And when places change, people gotta change with them. The people who built this mall, the people far away who own these chain stores, they think the mall is theirs, but they're wrong. It's our turf, and we protect it. And we are the wave of the future, the ultimate consumer. And all the useless people, and the thieves, the vandals, we consume them, and what we don't consume, we save. As patties in the Happy Burger meat, we like to share. It's really too bad, Ed. You seem like a cool guy, but you just found out too much, and we can't have you blowing the whistle on us. Not yet, anyway." And as we're watching this terrible Jimmy, this literal mall rat, change into this other creature and take Ed down and reveal to him that they've actually been putting human meat in the Happy Burger restaurant. This is something that really struck me, and it's honestly just a very weird story, as why does a creature of this stature care so much about small business? This man seems like he could possibly be a mayor. This man seems like somebody who could be complaining on Twitter, or anything such of the like. A true head of the people, and a true eater of them well. And as he does his full change, and we're looking at this grotesque picture of his giant ears and these very familiar teeth, Ed is gone. Ed is completely torn to pieces by all these other creatures that are joining him in the dead of night. And this is essentially the end of the first story, with only a couple more panels of these other mall security guards coming in the morning, realizing that Gary and Ed have once again not called in, that they're not even there, and that they basically left all the hard work for him left behind. And as these two approach this restaurant and look up, we are greeted to the ginormous Happy Burger sign. And as one of the officers orders a burger from this establishment, the other one asks him how we can eat this stuff, and he merely says, "Hey, we are what we eat." A truly evil story, and probably my favorite out of this whole book, as it actually has a pretty good structure to it. Alright, most of these stories in here are extremely short, or they're just purely art. Alright, they have a few sentences of dialogue, and that's about the end of it. While they do tell a good visual story, it seems to be more something to kind of enjoy for yourself. But with the next story, we'll be meeting a young man who seemingly can't be left alone on a Sunday morning when his parents go off to church, who has actually been taken to doing this strange ritual where they believe that he's too young to be just kind of left alone in the house, as he will kind of make a mess like he was some sort of stray dog. And they naturally decide that they are just going to leave him in the top drawer of his dresser. He's a very small young boy, and he fits rather perfectly, and for some reason this seems like a better idea than finding maybe some sort of daycare, or just bringing him to church anyway and telling everybody around them to just mind their own business. No, they are going to leave him in the top drawer of a dresser. And by the end of the story, the artwork that is shown and the story that is portrayed is honestly pretty dark, I'm not gonna lie. I was a little worried about showing this one on this channel, but we're getting spooky out here. And with the first couple of panels, we are greeted to the young boy and his father, who looks very strangely like Abraham Lincoln. And I don't know if this was kind of the purpose of this, but you cannot tell me that he does not. "I never liked Sunday. Mikey, come to breakfast, son. I liked my mother and father, and I liked eating breakfast, and I liked the funnies, but I never liked Sunday. I hate Sunday." "Come along, Michael. Sunday was church. Now, you go right to sleep, young man, and we will be home after Mass. Have a good nap, and we'll say a prayer for you." And as young Mikey's parents go off to Mass, he is left alone in his dresser. And he goes on to explain that he was too young to go to church, that he couldn't stand still, and that because his parents thought him so restless that he needed to stay locked away inside of this dresser. And with the next couple of panels, this is exactly what we will see, is this young boy just kind of curled in a ball in the top drawer. And as he listens to them leave in their car, he begins to cry cry himself to sleep, and wondering kind of whenever they are going to let this young man out. And what happens next is something truly tragic, as we cut over to the next panel and we see a giant car crash. We see his parents destroyed in the wreck, and this young boy is such a good listener that he never actually leaves this place. And with the next couple of panels, we just get a panning shot of this dresser as it gets darker and darker and the times pass on by as this boy is changed into something truly grotesque. And honestly, while he does look like a monster, he more looks like a victim of abuse, as his parents have just instilled a fear into him that he cannot leave this thing, and when he never does, the result is something that reminds me of the Creepshow skeleton. They never came home, and they never will come home. Never, never, ever. I don't know why mother and father never came to let me out. All I know is the dark, and I know I hate Sunday and sleep, and I know that if anyone ever comes along and opens this drawer, I'm coming out. And that is the end of that story. Sleeper is insanely short, but honestly one of the most shocking, as we get to see this young boy basically just having the time of his life, playing in his backyard, and then suddenly having all this taken away so his parents could just go to church, leaving him in the top drawer, being terrible parents obviously, and essentially losing his life, even though it does seem that maybe this drawer is kind of a interdimensional kind of thing, something that would give him life, something that would allow him to kind of actually grow up within this drawer and to become the terrible creature that he does. But this is Gore Shriek Delectus, something that I love the name of it so much as it's just a lot of fun to say and it sounds awfully very dark. And that is mostly the gimmick of this whole thing, are these terrifying artworks in stories that are honestly very gruesome, like the one that we will be coming upon next. A story called Rain, about an old man, about a hunter who just kind of runs through the forest killing everything in his path. And this story is mostly told from the perspective of all the different animals. There's not a ton of dialogue here, but we do get to kind of feel the inner fear of all these different creatures that kind of lie in his wake, as well as his family who will basically do nothing to step in front of this man, as he seems to be utterly insane. At least until the end, when everybody has had enough. Shut up, you bitch! Don't get mad, please! I said shut your face! Beat it, mongrel! Get it! And from here, all we will see is this man rampaging through the forest, basically just chopping down anything that he possibly could, and the only bit of dialogue here is the inner thoughts of all these different creatures, of deer, and of spiders, and of muskrats, who have clearly met their match, as we will see in the next couple of panels. Oh, get away! Not! Bite it! Away! And we see a young wolf-like creature trying to bite his way through a trap as his arm is stuck inside, until suddenly his life is met to an end. And with the next couple of panels, we see the old man stomping down on top of a rat, completely splattering it and turning this once living creature into a pile of mush. And with the next panel, as we see a snake thinking to itself that if he could only slither away in time, that maybe he can taste another day, when suddenly the old man grabs it by the neck, pins it down to the ground, and makes an incision right above its head, pulling its skin off its entire body, as his family begins to cry, watching from a distant bush, noticing an oncoming deer and knowing that its end will be met shortly, as we see a mama deer's face poking out from some bushes and her young fawn just kind of walking around, when suddenly we cut to another shot of a giant hunter's knife piercing through a pelt, as this mother deer looks on in fear, thinking to herself that mother loves you, as the young doe calls out for this to stop. And with the next panel, we see the old man talking to himself as he's holding the dead carcass of this animal, telling it that he's going to boil it in milk, something that I've never really heard of outside of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, about a milk steak, and it is the only other time that I've ever heard anybody utter boiling something in milk, and for that, I thought that was fairly interesting, and I just needed to kind of make that a point. But with the next couple of shots, we see a giant spider just crawling across the ground, saying it walks, and it comes, and it crushes us down. It only hopes that the rain comes and washes away this godlike creature. And with the conclusion of our story come in tow, we see the old man walking through the oncoming rain, getting madder and madder that he can no longer see his rampage, all these different creatures that he must destroy for whatever reason is going on inside of his head. And we see him continue to walk through this forest, being pricked by all these different branches and bushes and just getting ever more mad, as it would seem that the forest is beginning to fight back, when suddenly he steps on a rope. And what this is actually a spring trap, something that would actually send him flying up in the air and hanging upside down, when suddenly his family comes out from behind this tree, and the rage continues to build in this old man, screaming at them to cut him down. And what happens next is his own demise, as the rage that he's inflicted upon all these different animals will be inflicted upon him, as we cut to all these different shots of his family actually skinning this man alive. as he screams for them to stop and telling them that they are the crazy ones. And with the next panel over, we just cut to this house in a dark field, holes in the window, as we see a family telling stories around a chair. And when we flip to the next page and they ask them if Grandpa, wasn't that a very pleasant story? We cut to a giant page of what would seem to be this old man skinned alive and put back together, all stitched up, mouth and eyes and all, as he continues to scream and scream and scream. And this will be the end of this video. Gore Shriek Delectus, something that I just randomly found on the internet that I was very happy to come across, as it is some very gruesome tales. It is some very heavy things that are going on here. Mallrats is obviously something that you could find in Creepshow, just kind of a funny little story about mallrats actually being rats. But when it comes to sleepers and when it comes to rain, these stories are just a little more dark. And while sleepers could be viewed as sort of funny in a very morbid way, I think overall it's not good. Alright, this is a very tragic tale that when you really think about it is quite dark. But yes everybody, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope we're kicking off the season right. And I hope that you go out and kind of search up Gore Shriek Delectus for yourself, as there's a bunch of different volumes and the history behind it is kind of interesting, as it's just so mysterious and there's not really a whole lot on it. And these would seem to be some very sought after collector's horror media, and something that I now own. But yes everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the last couple videos with my giant Swamp Thing video, with this one, and with all these next Tales of Terror that we'll be coming across before we move on to that next Swamp Thing video. I think I got a lot of good stuff to share with you. So comment down below, maybe some things that I should check out, maybe some things you'd like to see, and as always, thank you so much for watching another episode of From the Heart, telling you more Tales of Terror, and eventually I would like to maybe come across something not so dark, alright? Maybe something that's kind of good feeling, alright? I remember when I started this channel, and I did actually a couple of ones that felt good, alright? And I'd like to do that again one day, but we'll see. But yes everybody, thank you once again so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode. And I hope you've enjoyed these tales of Gore Shriek Delectus. Stay spooky.